If you like these videos, help make more by joining us on Patreon. So, last month, the new Netflix show Altered Carbon premiered, and not as many people watched it as I think they should have. So I'm joined once again by the bearded one, James.
Hey!
And we're going to talk about the reasons why you should watch Altered Carbon. So I think first things first about the show, which grabbed me immediately, is that the universe is great.
Yeah.
Like, the idea, if you're unfamiliar, it's built on the idea that reverse-engineered alien technology has made humans effectively immortal by storing their consciousness on a small metal disc, which they can transfer from body to body, and therefore live for as long as they want.
No, it is a very rich world, and me and you have both discussed it. We've both said very Blade Runner-esque, not quite the same, which is nice. It's not a carbon copy, unlike some other stuff that's come out recently. It's got its own world. It's got exactly. You watched that one, obviously. I don't have anything.
I got 20 minutes into Mute and gave up.
Which is saying something. I mean, you've watched Under Siege 2 with me recently, and you're having a great old time. But yeah, this universe, they kind of pose the question: what if our physical bodies were disposable, and what that means for us?
What's interesting is that it's got kind of all the trappings and tropes of cyberpunk, of like virtual reality and cybernetic implants and clones and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's like this premise of transferring body to body just gives it a kind of fresh look. What I think it is that the author essentially came up with this idea and then kind of like hit go on the universe, and then it's like the idea just like spreads to all kind of corners of this universe, and it's like, what would happen if you could do this? And it's like, I say, like, bodies have become disposable in a way of like, if you get super injured, it's like, we'll just transfer you to the next one.
I like the religious angle as well, where just because we have this option of immortality, well, some of us who have the money, not all of us choose it because it's against our faith.
Neo-Catholics are called.
And it's quite believable that people would think of something like this. But it's nice. It plays around with all different walks of life, and I think that it would have an effect on that small percentage of people that were still religious at this point in the story. And obviously then we get told about the rebellion against immortality, basically, and it's all very nice. It all unravels, but
there's also like cool, because of this disposable bodies angle, there's like lots of little like bits in the universe and lots of little like characters and like new professions and stuff that have come about. Like the idea of like booting someone's consciousness up in virtual reality is a really cool idea. And like the whole thing of like the couple, I think it's in episode 3 or 4, where there's like
they're fighting each other.
There's a husband and wife who fight each other to the death so that their next incarnation will be an even better body.
That's probably why their marriage is lasting so long.
Probably,
just because they're able to beat the fucking shit out of each other and then they're fine.
Because then there's also like the interesting angle of like kind of the seedy underbelly and kind of the prostitution side of it, where it's like people can be
killed,
can take like kind of S&M and that kind of sick kind of it's torturous, not S&M at that point.
Literally to death.
You can literally kill people for pleasure because they'll be re-sleeved.
Death in this universe has kind of lost almost all of its value unless it's real death.
Real death, which is when the disc is destroyed.
At the back of the neck, which is real death. So there is still stakes, which is nice. And obviously the people who know how to actually kill somebody can still kill them. But you see this, you just see a decrease in the value of death because of this, and it shifts everybody's focus away from it and says, well, it's not really that bad, which is it's disgusting.
Well, it's not bad if you're rich enough, because that's the other angle, is that because it's kind of built on this in a massive inequality thing, whereas like the kind of gulf between the rich and the poor has gotten even bigger, and it's to the point where there's, in the first episode, where because the rich, when they get re-sleeved, they get to choose what kind of body they get, or clones of themselves and so on and so forth. But people who are poor enough or like aren't in high positions, they just kind of get given any old body, because there's a horrible scene in the first in the first episode where there's this old woman that kind of comes out, and then she goes up to someone else and goes like, "Mum," and then you realise it's actually a little girl, and she's been given the body of like a 60-year-old woman.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Yeah.
But you gotta go with what you've been given in this universe.
And it's one of those things where it's like when you take like the logic of the premise far enough, you come up with like all kinds of really interesting imagery and attitudes and characters and so on and so forth. It's really. Even after the 10 episodes are done, I just want to explore the universe more. Because what else can they do with that?
Well, talking about plot, will we get on to the basic premise and then talking about some things that are...
Yeah. So the basic premise is that 350 years in the future, this guy who called Takeshi Kovacs, Japanese-Polish name, gets revived after he was part of a failed rebellion to end immortality.
It was 250 years ago?
For him, yeah. And then he gets revived in like a new body, which is like ultra top of the line military grade badassery, and then he gets hired by Lawrence Bancroft, who's one of the richest and most powerful individuals in history. Basically,
I mean, people call him a god. Just about.
And Takeshi is essentially contracted to solve Bancroft's own murder because apparently he was killed at some point, and he doesn't remember why. Yeah,
but since he's so rich, he has a loophole out of the real death. Since he has basically when we save something on our computer and then it goes to the cloud just in case anything happens to the computer. That's basically the same premise.
What he can do with his own consciousness.
Yeah, so he's basically immortal, but somebody tried to. Tried to kill him for real.
Again, that's really interesting as well, because they call it needle casting, which is a cool phrase. And they're like, that whole thing of like, because they have like interstellar travel and stuff, but it's because they can jump body to body across like light years.
Yeah, which is really clever.
Is such a cool idea. Yeah, it's just why I love the universe even more. Again, it's like, it's like, what do we have? It's like, we can, if you can boot up a consciousness in virtual reality, like if it's digital, you can do so much with it. If consciousness has become digitized, it's like, it's a really, really cool idea.
It is. It kind of solves the problem of a couple of things like, wait, how did that character get there so fast or whatever? Where you'll see Bancroft in a scene and then you'll see him like the other side of the earth.
In a completely different location.
Yeah.
How did he? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, he has like every single body is somewhere.
It's like stored all over the place.
Yeah, it's completely justified.
Well, as I said, the universe is so good. It's brilliant. That's reason number one. But also reason number two is the visuals. Even though this is like the golden age of television and like Game of Thrones looks like it belongs on the big screen and all that kind of stuff. And like Star Trek Discovery looks great, Vikings looks great. Like so many shows recently have become like so cinematic.
Yeah, they've become a staple.
Altered Carbon is even among that is still impressive looking.
Yeah, it's got a very unique neon look to it. It never really betrays it at any point, and when it does, it's for contrast. Like when you see him in this neon world and then he thinks to his past life, essentially. And then you see a bit more of nature, and it's almost to kind of show you that he's not where, he's a fish out of water. So those scenes make sense. I think the world and the lore just work really well with each other.
It's got one of those things where it's like, I mean, you can't really make a cyberpunk anything without being compared to Blade Runner, and it's like you can tell there's influence in there. I mean, you can't really avoid that. But at the same time, it still looks different enough. There's still there's a different color palette to it all that makes it more unique to look at than Blade Runner. Like if you put them side by side, you definitely see some similarities, but they are still different enough.
I mean, in Hollywood's eyes, cyberpunk was almost created by Blade Runner, so you're always going to be. You're always going to be compared. Like, it's like fantasy. You're going to be compared with Lord of the Rings.
Pretty much.
But I think that they did enough to set themselves apart. It doesn't really think... You're not ripping it off.
Yeah, you're not like, I've seen where they've lifted that from and that from.
Exactly,
it's like, that doesn't really enter your mind. But for me, it's like... The sheer number of like visual effects shots in every episode is like consistently impressive, and I'm like, wow, on a TV budget you did this. Like even though the season I think cost like $90 million for the 10 episodes, I'm still like because it's so like
it's worth it.
dense. Where it's like you've got CGI cityscapes in the background and flying cars and all that kind of stuff, and like all the advertisements and like so many like motion graphics and things like that, and like cloning effects and all kinds of things. So it's like it's so dense and rich to look at.
Yeah.
That even among all these other cinematic TV shows, it still looks really impressive, really great.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Completely.
Yeah. And if the quality of the CGI as well is really, really good. It's better than some movies I've seen. You know?
Yeah.
In fact, it's better than the visual effects in Mute for sure. If I keep talking about Mute, this is gonna become the Wild and Corbin is awesome and Mute isn't.
I know, but this is Rowan just bashing Mute because it can't speak for itself.
You're so clever, James.
I know. Okay, next point.
Well, the next point is obviously it's like, well, good visuals, good cool universe is like all good and all, but they don't really matter if there's not good characters, and luckily we have really good characters.
And you know what?
It's a massive cast of like really interesting characters.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Joel Kinnaman
is good.
I think this is the best thing I've seen him in.
Yeah, because apart from this, I saw him in
Suicide Squad.
I saw him in The Darkest.
This is Katana.
She's got my back. Her sword traps the souls of those it kills. It's such a bad film.
Well done. Behold the voice of God. Jesus.
Oh man.
Well, he made the right decision.
He was terrible in Suicide Squad. He was even worse. He was even worse in RoboCop.
Oh yeah.
I also saw him in The Darkest Hour, which is like, if you don't know, it's like this random
Winston Churchill film?
No, that's not that.
Is that Darkest Hour?
That's Darkest Hour. This is
right.
The Darkest Hour.
I'm sorry.
Completely different, James.
I'm sorry.
The Darkest Hour is like some Russian-made alien invasion flick from like 2000. I want to say 2011.
Why was he in a Russian film?
I don't know. To be honest, it was produced by Timur Berkmenetov. I probably murdered that name.
Okay.
But it's the guy who directed the Ben-Hur remake.
Right.
He's done better movies than that.
Yeah.
But that's his most recent thing.
Okay.
But yeah, he was in that, and he was terrible in all three of those things. And I was like, Joel Kinnaman, Jesus, so bad. Like,
yeah.
And then as soon as when he popped up in the trailers for this, I was like, oh, really? Him again? And then when I actually watched it, he's totally found like his kind of his niche as a character.
Yeah, that he's like the scruffy detective noir, like I'm not a hero but I'll do this.
It's that kind of flippant kind of sarcasm through everything.
Yeah.
Where it's just like he's not really likable in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
it
works.
Yeah, you gravitate to his I don't give a shit attitude, but at the same time, like he is like rude and he is not nice. He's one of those people where he's like keeps saying like, oh, I don't care and none of this matters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
he cares, he does care. Yeah, he's very stereotypical.
There are things driving him,
but at the same time, you get why he's like that, and that's what makes it work. So will we go on to Bancroft,
Lawrence Bancroft, played by James Purefoy,
who I can say for a fact. Because I watched, I think it was the second episode, all the listeners out there. And the first thing I said to Rowan after I watched it was, Jesus, Rowan, that James Purefoy, or whatever his name is, he's got a massive schlong. You see, he just walks out in the second episode or whatever, really nonchalantly, just casually, just like
waving it about.
He'd fucking knock people out with that thing. And I was just like, well, I mean,
we probably should say this show is full of like sex and violence.
It's
and all
full
that
of sex and nudity, but it's all for a reason. It's all kind of showing.
Yeah, again, it goes back to that disposable bodies thing.
Exactly.
Everyone's kind of stopped caring because it's kind of like you obviously are not your body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's like if you're stuck in like the body of a supermodel, you're like, oh well, that guy's rich.
Exactly.
But then if you're stuck in the body of like a fat idiot weirdo, then it's like, I guess you just luck of the draw, not on your side or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's that funny thing of like people have just stopped. It's almost like they don't have any inhibitions anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, like Basically, if you've not seen the show before, expect a lot of nudity from every single character you see, basically.
I like how our breakdown of characters has gone like main character, and then as soon as you get to like the main supporting player, we're just like
talking about his dick. I mean, if he's listening to this, he can be smiling knowing, you know.
I bet James Purfoy's a big fan of this show.
Oh. A big fan.
But his character.
Not his penis.
Stop focusing on you're so superficial.
You couldn't look away from that either, man.
Like a close up of it.
I know. It basically zoomed in on it. That's all we're gonna say.
Yeah, Lawrence Bancroft, I do find to be a really fascinating character.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
He's one of those things where it's like, you know, again, it's like the show almost has like the stereotypes, but with just enough kind of unique elements to make it interesting.
Yeah, it makes them human. It doesn't make them black and white, which is nice.
Because he's not, again, like he's not a very good person, but at the same time, he has a lot of kind of monologues and a lot of like speeches about.
He has a lot of character and charm,
power, and like he's very, very charming and like well spoken, and like he's just an intriguing character. Like if you've lived for that long, like him and his whole family
are really interesting. 300 years.
Yeah, 350. I think it's 350 years that he's lived for.
Something
like
crazy.
Yeah. So like if you've lived like for that long, it's kind of like, and you're married to the same person, it's like, what does that do? And it's like, if your children have been, because his kids have been alive for like, I'm guessing like over a century, maybe even 2 centuries. But they've still got the bodies of like teenagers.
And almost the minds in a way, because they've not been properly brought up, which is saying another thing about, you know, if you live for that long, would you develop as fast? As well, and that kind of thing, is it's you know, they're all very good questions, and it ties in with the universe. Now going on with possibly, I mean, my first
favorite character,
probably. I mean, the favorite character is kind of tied between this one and yours. But you might need to help me out with this name here. Martha Higuereda.
As a Detective
Ortega, which she was amazing. She had spunk, man, and that was like she was really good. Oh, you never heard that expression?
Yeah, but that's an American thing. Here, that doesn't mean the same thing.
Well, I mean, I'm just using the American expression for it.
Want to break into the US market?
I am.
Good business plan, forward thinking.
I'll be the American one. But yeah, I think that Ortega was really ballsy. Just. Really like shit. I liked the fact
really
that
tough as nails.
Yeah, tough as nails, but she had that other side with her family. Really compassionate. She was just a good character that you could kind of find a bit more about, a bit of a tough cookie to crack, but then you kind of get.
I think that's what kind of these characters overall. What kind of elevates them is like their personalities. They're kind of tropes that you have kind of seen before, but like they have such interesting backstories and like such interesting personal lives that are all fleshed out in such great detail that it makes them more compelling. Because like I would say Takeshi Kovacs is like, as I say, is like kind of sarcastic, flippant, you know, I'm not a hero kid kind of attitude. But then his whole backstory of like fighting in this uprising, and like he had a whole thing about with like an abusive father and their mother and all, and like his
relationship with his sister, he has like the chip on his shoulder.
And it's like with Ortega as well. It's like, as I say, her whole family life and her whole backstory, which gets fleshed out kind of thing. So it's kind of like as the main plot progresses, you get to know everyone. And it's really, really. It just enriches. It enriches the universe, because it's also kind of like, well, how does this character feel about, you know, sleeving and immortality and all this kind of stuff, and what does this character think? Because
it's not just the what, but the why, which is nice. And you see the conflicts of why they've got the why in their head as well. Which is nice. It's got 10 episodes to flesh out these characters, and I think it did a really good job of it, whilst carrying on the story pretty consistently.
Definitely. Best character though, Poe, by far. Played by Chris Connor. So essentially in the show they have these things called AI hotels, which is like a hotel that's not run by any person, it's run by a computer. But they have a tendency to be overly attached. So if you're their guest, they protect you and they pester you and they want to love you and treat you to all the great things.
Because he's not had another guest in 100 years or
something like that. Yeah.
So
I think it's 50 years.
Is it 50 years? Yeah, right. But still, it's like if anybody comes in and you're a guest there, and
if anyone is mean to you, then the turrets physically the hotel will step in on your behalf.
Which is it's really awesome. Yeah.
And Poe is just like. Poe is this character who's named after Edgar Allan Poe, and the hotel is called the Raven, and it's all kind of this old Edgar Allan Poe kind of attitude towards it, which I've come to in the books was called the Hendricks, and the hotel was managed by a holographic version of Jimi Hendrix.
That's awesome.
Which is kind of cool, yeah. But they couldn't get the rights, so they just went for it.
That'd be so cool.
That would be cool.
Imagine just the main guy just like getting surrounded, Takashi just getting surrounded, and then he's just like, Jimmy, is there any way out of here? It's like, there must be some kind of way out of here. It's like, shut the fuck up.
That's not what I meant.
Oh, that would have been cool.
That would have been cool, yeah.
At the same time, the Poe is awesome.
Poe is like the great. He's the kind of like comic relief where, again, it's like the characters are so well layered because even for a holographic artificial intelligence program, essentially, he's like the comic relief superficially, but at the same time, it's like clearly these are sentient computer
machines.
programs.
Yeah.
Because he has his whole like he clearly cares for not only his guests, but he's completely able to empathize with like other people connected to the main plot and the main case and so on and so forth.
He kind of feels like a black sheep from the rest of the AI community that he has met. And he's more human lover than those people. I'm just looking at him on IMDb. He looks so different without his moustache.
Without the tash and the chops.
I think he should just have that moustache on him the entire time. He looked great.
He was in the SpongeBob movie.
He was in this. Oh wow! I did not know that. I mean. He's obviously taken a bit of a dive since SpongeBob movie, Rowan. Hard times have fallen on him.
That was the high point of his career.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that was a real standout for you?
I mean, there is one, but I think it might be a bit of a spoiler to talk about why they are.
Yeah, sure.
So
sure.
I mean, there's
I know you.
So many good characters in here.
Yeah.
Because what's also interesting is the characters that are played by multiple people. Because there's instances where because they get re-sleeved, they get played by different people, and so there's like this one kind of Russian hitman kind of person who ends up being in like 3 different bodies, I think, because he ends up in the first body that he's in, and then he goes to one of the Rowdy 3 from Dirk Gently show, and then he ends up in this big massive like bearded guy who was also Ortega's grandmother for a short stint.
I thought you did really well going between the two.
Yeah. Whoever that actor is, he's great. Yeah. Again, that's a really good scene as well. Because I guess what brings us on to like the themes of the show, which is another reason, is like there's a really good scene where Ortega resurrects her grandmother in the body of like this. I think he's like I can't remember what he's arrested for, like dealing drugs or weapons.
It's something,
But it's this massive, like, big bearded, like, biker
tattoo everywhere,
Yeah, like, not a nice looking guy. And then, but her grandmother is in that body.
Are you lashing out against the bearded tattooed community?
No, not at all.
On behalf of all bearded tattoo people out there. I know, but I'm speaking for them, Rowan, because nobody else will.
Oh, I see,
okay,
I see.
You're fine just the way you are. Okay, don't listen to Rowan about that. Okay, carry on, Rowan.
Yeah, anyway, thank you. This message. We dropped this podcast for a message. But there's a great scene where she brings her grandmother home, and they essentially like all sit around the table with her family and just kind of like discuss if this immortality is a good thing. And
it's a nice quiet scene.
Yeah, because what's interesting is like Ortega and her partner from the police department are there, her grandmother's there, and like they're kind of like they're for it, whereas her parents and the other kind of family members are against it. They're neo-C. They say it should never happen. God gave you one body, and so on and so forth. And what I like about it is that it doesn't the show doesn't fall on one side. It doesn't fall on either team, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it shows the spirit of both.
Yeah, because I guess the question presented in the show is not should humans be immortal, but it's this is how humans should treat each other now that they are. Because what's interesting is about as you said, the uprising, led by a character called, what was it, Kelchrist Falconer, who's played by Angelica from Hamilton. And her whole thing is like she wants to end immortality, not necessarily because she thinks that humans shouldn't live that long, but it's because of the inequality.
Yeah.
And it's because it's like if humans live forever, then a certain portion of people will always be in control.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like if you got rid of that, would she change her mind? If it was more equal, if it was more kind of, there wasn't a bigger discrepancy between the rich and the poor, would it change people's attitudes? And that's something really quite fascinating.
I think, me and you had the discussion about this and whether it was possible, but I think the show kind of subtly tells you, look, if we gave, if we had these things, then we would be shitty people too in a lot of ways. And it's hard to argue against it because humanity has done some pretty shitty things, so it's completely believable the stuff that goes on in this show. But whatever side you fall on, it's got a bit of that, and it tells you a bit of that.
Because what's interesting is that they raise like a lot of points about why it shouldn't happen, but they also raise a lot of points about why it should happen. Because it's like point one. It is good that people don't have to die as much and that they can be revived and so on and so forth. But then the flip side of that is bodies become disposable, and it's like, does that kind of desensitize people to kind of extreme violence and so on and so forth? But then at the same time, it's kind of like part of the plot of the show is this proposition to revive murder victims so they can testify in court to kind of out their murderer, which is a really cool idea. And so there's lots of nuance to the universe and to the themes presented in the show that you really can't say with 100% certainty, like this is what should be and this is what shouldn't be. There's a lot of nuance to the discussion, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah, which you need, I think.
And it's also great for the show that it can kind of carry that nuance, especially in amidst reason number 5 to watch the show, which is the action. Yeah. Because this show is action-packed.
It is, and it's not dumb either. It's pretty well choreographed for the most part. I think it was really well put together. The camera work is really good for the most part. For it being a TV show as well, and you just don't see a lot of these. You don't see a lot of shows with just work with all the stuff just like perfectly, and it's got gore if you want that, but it's not grotesque about it for the most part, even though there's some parts where it could have been. It uses it well.
My only kind of stipulation is that the editing is a bit too fast. The editing is a bit too choppy. On the fights, However, the choreography, as you say, and like the directing, and like because there was like behind the scenes stuff released, and it like shows how much work the actors put into pulling these fight scenes off, because a lot of it is them and it's not stunt people, and so like it doesn't have the kind of the flash or the polish or something like Into the Badlands, which has great fight sequences, but it has like really well constructed set pieces. And again, because this is a futuristic cyberpunk world, it is able to do lots of things with them. So like characters who are cybernetically enhanced, or like they have like robotic limbs or something like that. And there's one fight which takes place in zero gravity, which is quite cool. They also have in certain fighting matches, they actually have sleeves that aren't human. That are just basically like
these
horns and like monsters.
Biomutant things that people just sleeve in and then get killed or whatever, and then they sleeve back out again and go into their own thing again. But that was really weird to see. But it was nice to see.
And like my 2 favorite fight scenes are, I can't give away too much, but there's one in episode 7 which involves clones, which is just like insanity. Like the imagery is like really cool, and it's like really unique, and it's just kind of like the show has balls basically to kind of like present these images and tell you to deal with it, and like without any kind of like sugarcoating or anything like that, to just kind of show you these images in just a kind of a blunt, obvious way. It's really quite cool.
It's not too Hollywood about it, which is nice. It does, as you say, have balls, and it just kind of goes, well, they're in this situation, you if you don't like what you're seeing, deal with it.
Turn over.
Yeah, exactly.
And my other favorite fight scene is there's a sword fight at the end, which I thought was really quite well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, because like it seems like almost like the action gets better as the show goes on, even though these shows are usually like filmed in like big blocks because they're Netflix streaming things. It seems like they get better as the show goes along, because the first fight scene in the hotel, where Poe lends a hand, is good, and the imagery is cool, and like the choreography is good and all that kind of stuff, but the editing is the most choppy, I think, in that fight scene. But then as the show goes on, it's like it becomes cleaner and cleaner, and the takes become longer, and then you get a better sense of the geography.
See, I think I would replace, I mean, this is a bit off topic, but I would replace the last fight with the one when he comes out of a certain simulation.
Oh yeah.
I think I like that one. I think that one's really badass.
That one's really badass.
And I just quite like a bit of the gunplay that's going on in that bit.
Yeah. There's so many good things, because that's why this show is so great, because like it gives you the cyberpunk tropes. Like it has fun with itself, despite how kind of grim the subject matter gets. It's so much fun to watch, because it's like it still gives you like bio-enhanced people going head to head and gunfights and all this kind of like stuff just for the sake of being cool. But then at the same time, it's like it still gives you that thematic subtext and the well-developed characters that still kind of keeps you invested emotionally.
Yeah. I've got a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Have you got any cons?
My only con for the show, pretty much so far, is that the central plot of the murder mystery gets a bit lost.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of like... I was thinking, I think maybe episode 8 or 9, I was like, you know what, if they don't find out who killed Bancroft this season... I'll just wait for next. I'm cool. I was so endorsed in everything else that was going on.
Engrossed.
What did I say?
Endorsed.
I
endorse these things.
Yes, exactly. I was so engrossed that it didn't matter too much, but it is the main... It is one of those things, though, I can kind of forgive it for that, because it is almost like it's almost like a cyberpunk game where it's like, oh, I'm going off to do this quest. Oh, but then all these side activities start pulling you in, and it's quite real in that way, because in the end, the main thing that pulled him out into this world is really just another thing. As there's a lot of big things that are going on around that he has to try and unravel as well.
Because there's certain like B plots and like episodes and so on and so forth where it's like he traces down a possible lead, then goes on this whole thing, gets into like fights and kills people in virtual reality, all kinds of things, and then you realize eventually it's like, oh, turns out that had nothing to do with the main murder mystery plot, and then back to that, and it's kind of so because for me again, it's not a huge detractor. It's like the only con, and it's like. But yeah, by the time you get through a certain portion of the season, I was kind of thinking like, when are they going to solve that? Because it doesn't seem to have like gotten anywhere. That whole plot.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It seems like it's like kind of on pause for like 3 or 4 episodes, and then it's suddenly like resolved in the last 3.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think maybe that could have been like paced better or like woven into the other arcs better, maybe. But again, that's not a huge detractor, because, as I said, the universe is so interesting, and it is like such a fun show, and you are exploring like so many other things which are really intriguing and really hold your attention, and are either visually stunning, or they're badass and thrilling, or they're thematically fascinating. So there's lots there to unpack. That the fact that the murder mystery plot kind of gets lost in amongst that doesn't bother me a whole lot.
Okay. I think that the only gripe I had was at certain points it's very to the book's dialogue at a couple of points where you're kind of like, oh come on, that's kind of like 101 what you would do in a noir kind of thing. I just a couple of bits. I won't spoil what they like a couple of the bits are, but like I can kind of distantly so just like when he's trying to distance himself from Ortega at one scene, I'm like, you could
just a bit too cliche.
Yeah, it's a bit too cliche. A couple of bits, but everything else is so elevated that it doesn't detract anything, really.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, you notice it because it's a higher tier show than that.
Yeah.
And that's my only gripe with it.
Yeah, fair enough. So there's like, aside from some niggling flaws, that stop it from being like perfection, it's a really great show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope there's a second season because,
as
I said at the beginning of this, the reason I wanted to make this was because it had surprisingly low viewership on Netflix.
Yeah.
But again, no one really knows how Netflix decides to commission stuff, kind of thing. So there could be a second season, and I think like word of mouth can kind of spread and like expand the audience for a second season. So I hope it gets a second season.
Well, I mean, that's why this video is going out onto YouTube, and I hope
Netflix will see this and be like, you know what,
all
right.
All the other YouTubers as well. Hopefully, they're doing this kind of thing as well. Just because it deserves a second season. I won't say too much about the ending, but don't worry about if it gets a second season. If it doesn't get a second season, it leaves it at a satisfactory point where you can kind of end it.
Yeah, but it's pretty much self-contained. Yeah,
but there is room for the second season to go out. But go if you've not watched it yet. Rowan and I definitely agree. You should go watch it.
Thumbs up a recommendation.
Oh yeah, exactly. If there's anything on Netflix and you're just kind of bored,
if you're looking for a new show,
give the first episode a shot.
Yeah.
And who knows, it may just take you all the way to the end.
Exactly. I think it looks great ideas, great characters, cool themes, and it's just loads of fun. Yeah. So, as James and me said, marathon it on Netflix. But until then, have a good one. Live long and prosper.
Catch up.